Hi, I'm Simon Barrington. I'm the founder and director of Forge Leadership. And it's wonderful to be with you virtually at this Christian Camping International gathering. I'm sure, like me, you would have preferred to be in Sydney right now. I'm in my dining room in Ipswich in Suffolk in the United Kingdom. And maybe one day we'll get to gather together to do this journey. But for now, it's a strange time, isn't it? But I want to talk to you about the millennial generation. I want to talk to you about that group of people that are currently aged between 18 and 35. And as you think about how you are ministering to them, how you're engaged in reaching them through your camps and your conference centres, I believe you have a phenomenal and important ministry to this age group. And many of this age group are coming through your facilities in the coming years. When you're ready to open again, you'll find millennials on your doorstep, but also they're your leaders. They're your leaders of camps and of conference centres as well. So how can you understand them? I started asking some questions after 30 years of ministry of my peers. We started asking the questions, why is it that we all find it so difficult to maintain a growing, vibrant intimacy with Jesus on a daily basis? And why is it that we all find it difficult to articulate our authentic voice, to know our identity? And why is it that we all find it so hard to match up our actions with our words, to live with integrity? And why is it that actually having that resilience, that inner strength to keep going over the long term is so hard? And why aren't we having the influence that we thought that we should have when we were younger, but hasn't actually materialized? And I found in my early 50s that my peers were asking that question. And so I started to ask, well, where are the next generation in understanding those 5 I's of leadership? A deeper intimacy with Jesus, a security in their identity in Christ, deep level of integrity, inner strength or resilience to keep going, and an influence to change and impact society. How have the millennial generation been developed? Are they any different to us, or are they exactly the same? And so we went and did a year-long research project interviewing nearly 500 millennials with 50 in-depth qualitative interviews and 442 online questionnaires in the UK. And I'd like to share with you what we found. But before I do that, in the literature that we read before we did the research, millennials were being characterized as self-centered, narcissistic, lazy slackers, needing instant gratification, who were disloyal, pampered, spoiled, have a lack of respect for authority, and were totally entitled. Not a good set of adjectives to be used for a generation. But what I found was that the existing research with millennials was all asking the question, how have millennials responded to the culture that we as boomers and Gen Xers have actually created? But my core understanding now was that actually millennials were not those who were just responding to the cultures that we've created, but they are those who are now in leadership. They are those who are now leading significant organizations. And so we went out and did a piece of research with millennials who were already leaders, asking them, how have you been shaped? What do you look like? What do you understand about leadership? And how are you going to lead into the future? And these were the results. We asked them about their sense of identity, first of all. And when asked which characteristics they observed in the most effective leaders, millennials said integrity was top of the list for them, followed by humility and passion. You see, millennials will tell you that actually they can sniff a sense of lack of integrity from a million miles, and they will run away from the context where there is a lack of integrity. Most important for millennials are that your actions match your words. No longer good enough to be a great preacher, but also to be someone who, when you come into close proximity to them, they actually are the real deal. And the highest compliment that a millennial can pay you is that you are a real deal. And then they love this sense of humility, that actually you have a great understanding of your own failures and your own faults, and you're able to articulate those well. You see, trust with millennials is earned through consistency and empathy, through coming close to you. It's not given by position or competency. Millennials expect to be able to come close to you as a leader and to see your life in the raw. They want to experience that you are who you say you are, and they expect a humility and a realistic appraisal of your current reality and faults and failures. You know, the first thing a millennial will do before they meet you is Google you and find out what you say about yourself on the internet and what other people say about you as well. And so if you boast and you go over the top in your explanation of who you are, they'll soon suss that out and they will run a million miles from it. But they respond really well to authentic, real passion and purpose. They don't like hierarchical, top-down, dictatorial, ego-driven, mask-wearing cultures. In fact, those are detested, but rather those that are real, gritty, authentic, that wrestle with the real issues and where what is said is actually what is done. But underlying that sense of wanting people to be led by people of integrity was their own deep sense of a need for approval and fear of failure. In fact, those were the top two things that millennials thought would negatively impact their leadership, which shows that actually under the surface is a real fragility of identity, confidence, and lack of self-esteem. And this was particularly acute for women. 55% of millennial male leaders said their self-esteem was high or very high, but only 29% of women leaders saying that their self-esteem was high or very high. And so although we've done a huge amount to actually promote the role of women in leadership, there's still much more to be done to achieve balance and to address this. And so millennials love environments in which people can try, innovate, and fail. There is a fracture in our culture. There is a tectonic plate shift that has happened in our culture that actually means things that used to work in the past don't work as well now. And everybody is recognizing that actually we need to give permission to try new ways of doing things. If ever in your organization you needed to be more creative, more innovative, more risky, allow people to fail safely, it is now with the millennial generation. Creativity, experimentation, and innovation are the hallmarks of this generation, and younger leaders need to know that they're able to take risks, and they will be supported in doing that, and they will be encouraged in doing that, and you'll get behind them in doing that. The third thing on identity is that millennials said that the quality of their relationships in the workplace were important or extremely important. If you ask a millennial leader what's the best place to work, they will say the place where there is the best relationships. And what's the worst place to work? It's the place where there are the poorer relationships. Millennials want relationship, and they want that in the workplace. And millennials will tell you that actually it's much more about the journey to a destination with you than it is about the purpose and the outcomes. 94% of millennials say teamwork is important or extremely important, and 90% say collaboration is important or extremely important. If you get a millennial in a room, they will say to you, Simon, the problem with you, and they love saying that, the problem with you baby boomers is that actually your worldview started off really narrow. And it did for me. I had two television channels growing up, BBC One and BBC Two. ITV came on in my 20s, and then Channel 4 and then Channel 5. The internet didn't come on until my mid-20s, early 30s. And in that context, my worldview grew and grew and grew broader and broader and broader over time. But for millennials, their worldview started off really large, really broad and really wide. And so they can see the scale of the problems that their generation faces. And so if you as an organization say you're going to solve the world's problems, millennials will laugh at you because they can see the global scale of what needs doing, and they want you to be in collaboration with others in resolving those large problems like climate change, like the misuse and overuse of plastic, the problems like the refugee crisis. They want people to be collaborating because they recognize that individual organizations and individual egos or people cannot resolve over those problems on their own. And so increasingly, leadership is a team game and a collaborative game. The emphasis is on any initiative needs to be on the journey and the people, less than on the outcomes and the activities. And unity and working together are a hygiene factor for millennials. We then shifted from identity to look at culture, and a key message here on culture for millennial leaders is it's not what you're doing, it's the way that you're doing it, and that culture beats programs every time. 78% of millennial leaders selected having a sense of purpose as the first or second most important thing at work out of 8 options. They want a shared purpose, a shared sense of working together against a clear why. Why are we doing this is a key question for them to answer. You see, they've grown up having their own personal brand. By the time they come to work for you or come to your camping or conference facility, they also already have an Instagram account. They've built this sense of brand for themselves. They've made statements about the world, and they will measure your statements about your organization against their personal brand and their personal statements, and they will think through how their own sense of purpose aligns with the purpose of your organization, and they want to be involved in developing that purpose. Bring them onto your leadership teams, bring them on early, give them problems to solve, promote them above their level of incompetence. They will want to explore value and ethos with you as well. And then we asked them about leadership development. How has their leadership development been? What has worked for them and what is working for them? And mentoring and one-on-one leadership developments are the most desired amongst millennials, and they want that to be face-to-face. You see, they'll say to us, you know, Simon, I can go onto YouTube, I can get as much content as I can read as many books on Kindle or audiobooks as I like. There's so much information out there. I need your help face-to-face to make sense of that. Don't send me on another course. Don't send me to take in content. I'm doing that already. But I desire more than anything that you will sit with me and that you will wrestle with the issues that I'm facing as a leader. 87% of surveyed millennial leaders have said that they have a mentor, with over half saying it was very effective. They're a discipling generation. I'd really like to emphasize this with you. Millennials are a discipling generation. If you want to see discipleship grow in your camping and conference centers and in your leaders, bring millennials into designing that process. We have in our church an 18-year-old lad who's taken on himself to take the 14 and 13-year-olds out for breakfast on a Sunday once a month. And the discipleship that goes on there is just absolutely phenomenal. If you ask a millennial leader, what's the best thing about leading? They will say, raising up the next generation of leaders. I was not saying that when I was 26 and 27. I was saying it was about building an organization and delivering difference and change. They're saying, no. It's about bringing on the next generation. It's about discipling the next generation. And they desire your focused attention and help to do that. So what challenges do they face as millennials? Well, interestingly, the most cited challenge in our research was managing conflict. They don't know how to do conflict well. In fact, one of the best quotes from the whole of the research was this one. I always admire leaders who can have those difficult conversations. Not necessarily with me, that would be horrible. That's one thing I would love to learn to do well. So I love leaders who can manage conflict well, but please don't do it with me. But I want to learn how to do it well. And so managing conflict, and I think this comes from the lack of self-esteem and confidence, but also their high value on relationships. They want to learn how to do conflict well. One of the other challenges was how to get a whole life balance, how to balance work and life, and more than any generation, they see this as a massive challenge for them. They saw their parents burn out, they saw lots of divorce, they lots of family breakdown, and they're determined that doesn't happen again. And so they're asking the question, how can I get a balance between work and life that is really effective for me? And that's why you'll see them want to turn up for work at 9 and leave at 5, because actually their gym's important to them, their physical health, their mental health, their emotional health. They think really holistically about body, mind, soul, and spirit. And therefore they need churches that are ministering to the whole person, and camping and conference centres that are ministering to the whole person, that bring the different emphasis, because actually that's what they're wrestling to implement with their own life. They're seeking better whole life balances. They won't be sucked into rotas and duties just for the sake of them. Their questions are about how discipleship, which fits with the whole of their lives. How can I live out my life in my workplace? How can I live out my faith effectively in my workplace, in my streets, in my family, in my neighborhood, as well as in my church? And they're struggling with confrontation and need help and support to know how to engage with conflict well. So some key takeaways about millennials to help you lead them well, disciple them well, work with them well. First, relationship is absolutely everything for them. They see relationship through everything through a relational lens. Secondly, tension is their norm. They know how to manage tension. They'll say to me, Simon, you baby boomers like to solve problems. You want to know how to get out of the maze. As millennials, we want to learn how to live well within the maze, to live well with tension. And so when you're working with millennials, learn to hold things in tension rather than to solve the problems. They need you to wrestle with those tensions well. Leadership development is personal, it's one-to-one, it's bi-directional mentoring, learning up as well as down, common learning, wrestling with the problems that we face in our society together. And leadership for millennials is wholehearted, it's resilient, and it's sustainable. So where does that leave us? How do we work with millennials? How do we attract them to our organizations? How do we retain them, and how do we develop them? Firstly, we can create high support, high challenge environments. High support because they're a fear of failure and need for approval, but high challenge because they desire that sense of purpose. We can create organizations where there's clear bi-directional mentoring, where you're willing to learn from millennials and they're willing to give to you. We need to teach about conflict transformation. We need to give early leadership opportunities. Lots of organizations now creating shadow boards of younger leaders, recognizing that the world has shifted, that the world that we inhabited when we were younger is very, very different now. And so getting a different insight and bringing different solutions to common problems, thinking in different ways is really important given leadership opportunities. We need to create environments where millennials can have self-care but also balanced lives, and where they're able to wrestle with mental health issues. But we also need to teach about identity. As Christians, we should be right at the forefront of helping millennials understand the question, who am I? And they are wrestling with that, and they need your help to help them understand who they are in Christ, not just at a head level, but also at a heart level. I don't know about you, but for me, there are so many hallmarks of a Jesus culture in the millennial generation. Their desire for relationship and community, their desire to be a discipling generation, their desire for authenticity and integrity, their desire to love and bring on the next generation, their desire to have authentic relationships and communication and to deal with conflict, but also many challenges as well. How do we help them find that clarity of identity, find that clarity of purpose, and actually realize their whole of their potential? So as you work with millennials, my prayer is that this research, which you can find in our book, Leading the Millennial Way, but also in our research on the website, millennial-leader.com, will actually help you structure the way that you respond and bring out the best of faith-filled, Jesus-loving, intimate, integral inner strength in millennials, so that they can have the influence on our world that God has called them to have. I hope you found that helpful as you grapple with bringing on the next generation through Christian Camping International globally.